Hi, everyone, and welcome to our data science office hours. Today is January 24th. I am here with Chris and I are both student advisors for the data science vertical. We are excited to have you guys join us today for our office hours. And we have two wonderful mentor hosts and also one special guest. Ooh, stay tuned. So handing things off to one of our hosts, Mohammad.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Molly. Good evening here from Chicago. It's lovely to meet you guys here every Thursday. I'm very excited today to co-host this session since we have a very special guest. Today we're going to be talking with Preet, and he's going to tell us about his background in data science and his journey, give us some insights hopefully, and I'm very excited for that. Before that, over to you, Ram. Give us a couple of words about yourself, and so we can segue to Preet.
Thanks so much, Mohammad and Chris and Molly. So greetings from Seattle. And I am really, I'm not going to introduce myself. I'm just a Springboard mentor and I'm a data scientist. As you can see, I work in the AI and healthcare space. I've been working for a long time. And I also love to teach. And I love to do shows. Sometimes I do stand-up comedy these days now too. But keep that a secret. Keep that a secret. And so I'm super curious to actually know what Preet has to say, his views on data science and how he ended up in LA.
All right, Preet, so how about this? We'll give you a few minutes to talk about yourself, and everybody attending here, feel free to ask questions, unmute yourself, or type it in the chat, and we will, myself and Ram will intervene every now and then to highlight a point or ask a follow-up question. Over to you, Preet.
Sounds good. Hi, I'm Preet. I think this April I'll be 2 years with Springboard as a mentor with the data science career track, and yeah, so long convoluted story how I got into data science. I've been in some version of tech for about 20 years now. I started in '99, so yeah, exactly. That was my first startup in '99 during the first boom. My academic background is in a branch of artificial intelligence called algorithmic game theory and reinforcement learning, which everybody to some extent knows about: multi-agent systems, multi-banded algorithms, that sort of thing. You know, if you've got a bunch of agents all working together, how exactly would they work together? That's what I started off with. Just like everybody else, I ended up in some version of machine learning because that's just the way it is today. I've usually worked as lead data scientist for a few startups, sort of head of AI, helping build AI apps on the spectrum of data science, where you've got analytics on one side and you've got AI applications on the other side, statistics on one side, ML on the other. I'm more towards the ML software engineering side rather than the statistics side. But I've worked on both applications. So that's roughly my background. Most recently, I was heading the AI efforts at Car Labs, which dealt in chatbot systems. We made chatbots to increase sales. If you go to Kia.com, a cute little animation of a robot will pop up and say, "Hi, I'm Kian. I'm the AI-powered assistant for Kia." That was us. So things like that.
This is very interesting, Preet. And in fact, like that's probably, you can label your PhD as a PhD in data science or in AI in a sense. So there's a minimal transition for you between, but we can ask about moving from academia to the private sector in a sense. How do you describe that transition? Many of our students, especially people starting the cohorts and the courses, are mostly academia wired, and they have a lot of questions and concerns moving to that commercial enterprise. So, a few words of wisdom would be appreciated. What were your expectations, and what would you wish that somebody told you when you start working there?
It's a good question. When I started out, there were very few of these transition programs. You get a lot of PhDs today joining incubator programs. Places like Springboard or Insight, and moving towards industry. But there was very little of that in those days. There's still a huge gap between academic research and applications these days. I was already working in scalability architecture while I was doing research. So I had taken a break. So it was easier for me. But I would say for a lot of my friends, it was extremely difficult because they didn't have software engineering skills. You had a lot of people that came with backgrounds, excellent coders, by the way. A lot of them are amazing coders, way better than I was, way better than a lot of my friends in computer science. But they came in from, they had PhDs in bioinformatics, one was in particle physics, amazing coders, but they did, passing a software engineering interview is very different. And a lot of data science interviews have some component of coding. And if you don't understand the language or some of the conventions, it becomes a little bit difficult. So part of that, part of the preparation these days is definitely veering towards a more software engineering approach. Even if you're in the analytics side, like I mentioned, you're an R programmer, you're just sitting, you're taking a mountain of data, you're looking to find a pattern in the data, you're given a mountain of data and say, is this correlated with sales? Can we bring up something that's correlated with sales? Invariably, after the analysis, now the trend is towards taking the code which you did to analyze the data, packaging it as a module so it can be reused by somebody later on. And so that does take some effort of software engineering skills. That's what I meant by when I say it's moving more towards that line.
This is very interesting and fascinating to me, and it definitely the bar keeps raising now that more people are entering to the field. Yeah. Understanding statistics is not enough. Knowing how to code is not enough. Deriving insights is not enough. Now probably you should be able to deliver end-to-end kind of a product in a sense.
It's moving towards that. I would definitely say so.
All right. Yeah. This should give some good feedback. What do you think, Ram?
So, I mean, I have a related question actually, which is, I'm sure, Preet, that you will be bombarded with CVs every day. And so if you were, so how do you kind of go about picking CVs these days? I mean, given that some of the stuff that you said, what would an applicant do or put on his CV at least that make him or her kind of stand out and kind of quickly grab the attention of the interview board?
A good GitHub set of repositories. Essentially, that's my number one go-to right now. I've interviewed people who've had PhDs, and I had one who specifically had a master's in machine learning from a very prominent university. And I had very basic, at that time I was in a place where we needed very strong Python skills. He had a problem even doing a very simple 4-line whiteboard coding problem in Python. He simply didn't, he hadn't developed those skills as yet. And I would probably put his level as somebody who's just entered the average person who entered the Springboard data science career track. You've got some understanding of Python, but it's not fully developed as yet, which is why we have an intro to Python module. So you get a lot of that. A good GitHub repo tells me a few things, right? It tells me it gives me a good lower bound. And when you get these resumes, you think there is no way in hell that these people aren't meeting the lower bounds. You're like, it is impossible. And then you meet them. They're very nice, very intelligent people, but resumes need to be taken with a pinch of salt, and to a very large extent. It's not that it's false or anything, but very often when you've worked in a big project, in a big company, with a team, you might not have all the skills that go into making that project a reality. And good GitHub repositories tell me straight off the bat that you know what you're talking about. You at least there's a lower bound. You know how to code. You know some basic concepts. It's a great start.
So Preet, just to touch on this a little bit further. So basically, say I have a student that knows how to code in R or in Python or something, but you're talking about more software development skills. Is there like a resource we can go to so they could actually go more toward that abstract idea of software development versus I know how to code?
Well, okay, the way I would summarize it, by the way, very quickly, I'm also getting questions in the group chat. How exactly, what's the format?
You can, let's see, I will shift into that tab. You can go ahead, address that point, and I'll shift to and I'll start asking those questions.
Okay, so should I answer Carolina's question right now, or?
Sure, go for it, that's fine.
Okay, yeah. So she actually said something very related to what you said. Hi, Preet, can you specify what it means for you to have strong Python skills? In this particular case, I mean a good solid introduction, which basically means you should know how to write a function. You should know data structures, to the level, the basic data structures in Python. You should know what a hash table is. You should know what an array is, which is a list, how to handle and create different types of dictionaries in Python. 90% of the time, those are a set, a list, and a dictionary are the only three data structures you'll be using in Python. You know how to do that. You know how to write functions. That's pretty much it. Creating a module, two other auxiliary skills. Creating a module, for example, takes very little, right? You just need to know how it's literally one of those things where you Stack Overflow it. You do it the first 2 times, and it becomes fairly easy after that. Knowing how to create a REST API. Invariably, if you work at a large enough startup, you'll be having an engineering team that does that. But creating a REST API, that's another area of Python. Essentially what they call web app Python skills. How to create a quick REST API in something like Flask or Tornado. If you want, you can pick that up. It's always good to have that as an auxiliary skill. But I really meant very basic ones. I meant knowing how to create a function. I meant knowing global versus local variables, core data structures, lists to the level of, say, something like list comprehensions, knowing just the basics of how much time does a particular function take, how much space does it occupy, so we can see what the footprint is like for optimization. We shouldn't forget that in a lot of AI, most of the algorithms we deal with are what we call superlinear algorithms, right? They take if you scale the data up by 10 times, the algorithm's not going to take 10 times longer. It's going to take 100 times longer or 1,000 times longer to run. So knowing good data structures makes a lot of difference later on when you try to do some very quick optimization.
Thank you, Carolina. That was a wonderful question. And yeah, you're right. It does touch on that point. So in a sense, it's worth your while to invest in learning a little bit more than just the casual interaction with the language to list it in your resume when you apply for a job. Definitely like a project, a couple of things, just to show your case that you're serious in learning this project and you spend your time actually learning Python or R or Bash.
Absolutely. If nothing else, the idea that if you're going to be doing some level of analysis or coding an algorithm or a recommender system or anything at all as a data scientist, any application you'll be coding as a data scientist, just the ability to take that and package that up into a module that can be reused by other people. At least that level of Python capability should be there.
We have a question from Sushama, and she's asking in particular about random forests and data sets. She's asking how she or he had to choose data set for projects. It keeps going forever with random forest. Well, this is a little bit generic, and it really depends on the case with this, but having like a lot of features, that could be an issue with this. And did you try something simpler rather than random forest and it ran out and it converged with much shorter time? How many trees you're asking, how many branches you're requesting the tree. So there are a few parameters to fiddle with to see what is going on here. This particular problem. I would probably refer to your mentor about this specific question. Ram or Pete, if you have any question, if you have any further points to address.
Yeah, for this question, did you mean for this specific question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would kind of try things like I was trying to secretly chat with Sushama about this question. So try n jobs equals -1. That makes sure to make sure that you are utilizing all the cores of your computer, or if you are using the cloud, making sure that you are using up all available processors, and also doing things like try reducing the number of estimators. Start with say 5 estimators. And in the next round, say, double the number of estimators to 10, and then try 20, then 50. And also, as Mohammad mentioned, try, cutting down, randomly choosing, half the set of features for the next round. So there are ways to set that. So do not try to, make sure that you set those hyperparameters, either using grid search or, some other way in scikit-learn. And I love random forest. It's my go-to algorithm. This is the thing that I will try out first, especially when the people actually ask me to say, stuff about the data itself, like, which features are, contributing to your model and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ram. Preet, if you want to comment on this, or we can go to the next question.
We can go to the next one. You basically covered what I would say. I want to start off with a very simple algorithm. Starting off with an ensemble algorithm, and is counterproductive. Yes, go on.
Excellent. So the next question is from Kayode, and sorry if I butchered your name. It says, what level of statistics, that's probably for Preet, and when he's interviewing job candidates, what level of statistics do you look for in candidates, and how much of statistics do you use in practice?
I got to be honest, very little. There's classical statistics. I actually did, I have a second degree in economics, and we had to do a lot of econometrics back in the day. But frankly, they top out at, those kind of models typically top out at things like multivariate linear regression. You obviously get, some really complex estimators that are out there, but usually at that point, I'm veering towards, more machine learning than anything else. The basics are always good. So it depends. At certain places, for example, Facebook, data science typically are only statisticians. And I don't know if anybody else knows this. It was incredibly surprising for me to find out. They've got a separate group called Facebook Machine Learning for machine learning, but the data science group technically are only doing hypothesis testing, and they deal with classical statistics. But I think for the most part, I've rarely come across classical statistics these days. You should know, obviously, the basics to some extent if you've taken one simple inferential statistics course, or the limit of what you definitely know in what's provided in the Springboard Unit 8 for the data science career track is extremely useful. It's a good intro. You should know, the basics, because statistics gives you some kind of grounding, at least in metrics representation, right? That's essentially what the moments are. You've got one metric trying to represent an entire mountain of data. So that concept is very useful. Yeah.
Thank you for tying this with a specific chapter in Springboard. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, so I'd just like to extend what Preet said. So as far as I know, Facebook and Google, and also Zillow has these pure data science teams. They do no machine learning. They are, when you are invited for an interview, they kind of tell you the first phone interview that we are not asking you to do machine learning. We just want to make sure that you know basic statistics, like two different how would you pick a hypothesis, basic things like hypothesis testing and t-tests and ANOVA and stuff. And the Facebook machine learning team was kind of like super prevalent in the Bay Area, but now they have a presence in Seattle too, because I was called for their event. And yeah, so Seattle is also Seattle Facebook is also now beginning to hire machine learning scientists. They call them machine learning scientists and not data scientists. So if you're a data scientist, expect to be bombarded with questions on how to use pandas or SQL to, do all kinds of crazy things with data frames. And, how would you kind of, do some kind of an intervention and see the effect of that intervention? Things like, how would you choose a sample and how would you test that out with, supposing, Facebook introduces a new app, how would you measure the effectiveness of that app and that kind of stuff. And I was surprised to know that Google also does that. So because we collaborate with Google quite a bit, so they have a separate data science team. They will tell you that we do not expect you guys to know machine learning. We just want data scientists. Oh, okay. So it looks like they look at data scientists. Oh, Zillow too. They have a data science and visualization team that does not do machine learning. So yeah.
So the general impression I'm getting from Ram and Preet, and probably close to my experience, is that basic course in elementary statistics, the first course you would take in college is a fair game. Like this is just same thing as knowing Pythagorean theorem. You might not use it, but it might pop in one day. So that's a fair thing to be asked about. Naive-based statistics, A/B testing, etc. Other than that, that will be probably specified in the job requirement, and probably be a specific team. They have their own statistician or something like that would like to dwell on that. It will help you a little bit when you read the papers to see where, like some of the papers in the discipline, how do people, how is the machinery of a specific model working? but it's more towards the general knowledge. You don't need to take a graduate degree in statistics for sure to enter this field.
Yeah, basically like p-values, yeah, and confounding variables. That's one question that many of my friends who did these data science interviews get asked. How would you control for confounding variables? So, those kinds of stuff.
Great insight from all of you. And I think as we move on, I wanted to see these other questions and encourage the students asking them. I think some great questions. These questions, the students are the life and blood of these sessions. These questions drive it. I think they're great. Would love for you guys to unmute and unvideo yourself if you feel comfortable. Hopefully we're not intimidating, but I see great questions. So I don't know if Lakbe or Sushma or Para want to unmute themselves, but I would
we'd love to
encourage
hear
it.
from you guys.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lakba. Hi.
Hey.
So I would like to ask a question to Preet, Mr. Preet. Can you please tell me about the data science team in your organization and any other organization, that you know? How are they set up? How many people and what are their roles and positions? Can you please tell me about that, please?
Currently, I'm with a stealth startup that only has about 5 people. We're all some variation of machine learning engineers / data scientists. But it's set up very differently at different places where you go to. Previously if you're building an AI app, typically every engineer needs some level of machine learning or NLP expertise. If you're building an NLP, if you're building a chatbot or something, for example. At an e-commerce startup, typically the way at large startups, typically the way it's broken up, you've got a data engineering team whose only job is to take the raw data, ingest it into a data warehouse, maybe do some basic pre-processing and prepare data sets for the data analytics team and the data science team. Sometimes they're separate, sometimes they're together. Sometimes you've got a dedicated separate data science team, which takes the data then and processes it for various internal customers within large companies or established startups. But sometimes you also, another paradigm is you've got data scientists attached to specific teams. They're embedded within the finance team, within the marketing team. So a typical application for data science in an e-commerce startup or B2C startup would typically be something like churn analysis, right? Acquiring a customer is very expensive as compared to maintaining a customer, preserving a customer, preventing them from going away. So churn analysis or retention analysis essentially is trying to come up with an analysis and then later on a strategy that gets up and says, all right, we're losing 10% of our customers. Why are we losing them? What can we do to keep them? Maybe we need to offer discounts. If we offer discounts, what level of discount should we be offering so as we minimize our losses while preserving our customers? So depending on the internal funding for companies, either you have a data science team that's completely dedicated and treats the finance and the marketing and other teams as internal clients, or they're embedded with those teams exclusively, working for them.
Wonderful. So Shama, I see you're unmuted. If you feel like asking your question, which is a very good one, go ahead. If not, we'll read it for you. Okay. So basically, Sushama asks, how did you to choose specialization between general machine learning and deep learning? And please go for it, Preet. And I have strong opinions on this, but I'll keep it to myself now. Go for it.
Sure. I think the way to actually bring it up is a few years ago when deep learning was, this incredibly hot keyword. I was talking with somebody I knew who was head of data science at a major startup here in LA. And he's like, Preet, can you come in on a consulting project to develop a deep learning project for us? Because at that time, there weren't a lot of people who knew deep learning. I was like, do you have the data for it? Because the real issue with deep learning is that you need an order of magnitude more data. Everybody, at this point, it's common knowledge. And he says, we don't, but it's just what the investors want us to do because it's incredibly hot right now. So I think a lot of that describes people who set up deep learning projects. They often don't have enough data to justify it. and good ensemble algorithms will work just as well, or actually usually better. But we should be careful not just to pursue something just because it's incredibly hot right now in with medium.com articles or with the information you're being bombarded with.
Yeah, just because your boss reads something in a magazine while he's flying doesn't mean that this is something the organization needs to commit to. And everybody in this meeting, as a data scientist, it's your job to actually coach your management, advise them on what is the right solution, what gives the results, and that kind of a thing, and manage their expectations in that regard. So, just a buzzword. It's important to learn it if you have the data and the domain for that, but definitely you need to learn machine learning before jumping into one very specific sliver of it. It's called deep learning.
What 100%. And deep learning is nothing but a very specific case of ensemble algorithms. If you know ensemble algorithms really well, then only at that point you say that, all right, things aren't working with tools we've had so far. We need to move into neural nets. Fundamentals. Absolutely.
Tyler has a question. If you like to unmute and ask it, go for it. If not, we can read your question for you.
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Preet, for joining, and thanks for all the insights. I come from a very different non-engineering background, and so I had a question in terms of different roles and what's required of these roles. So if it's a data strategy position, as compared to just a data scientist position, how would the candidates be, selected differently, or what would be the interview processes?
It depends what level they're talking about. Typically, when the word data strategy has been used in the startups I've come across, it's usually been mid to senior level, and it usually has some kind of non-technical role. Invariably, it's somebody who liaises with, say, the marketing or the finance departments. Marketing and sales is usually very standard. It's usually a revenue-facing role. I think that's the only.
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. It's usually just a perception thing. It's a revenue-facing role. So if you're a senior data scientist embedded, say, with sales or with business development or with the chief revenue officer, with any of these departments, typically then they'll call it data strategy. And it could be something as simple, and it's really characterized by the projects, right? You've got a mountain of data, and just very recently there was somebody who just had like a giant mountain of data, and they said, well, we need to find something in here that could be correlated with sales. Now this is real world data. For all you know, nothing's correlated with sales. And that very well might be the situation. And if there is something correlated with sales, you've got to figure out, is this actually, is this pure correlation? Is it causation? Is it something we can actually use as part of our strategy? Yeah, as to increase sales. So that's essentially, I think that's the only difference, is if you've worked on the revenue facing projects, or, if you've got some kind of expertise that shows that.
So would then the interview process be more inferential and seek to look into your statistical knowledge and how you would be applying that to any sort of revenue stream? Or would that be more like a coding and for Python fundamentals, or both? It
really depends on what level you're being hired at. If you're like director of data strategy, which is invariably what I've seen with the words associated with data strategy, you're not really coding, right? You're building up, you're usually leading teams to increase revenue somehow. But if you're a data scientist going in with some kind of data strategy team, typically what happens is what they want to see is usually some level of domain knowledge. If you're working for a finance company or working with sales, do you actually understand, when they talk, for example, when I talked about churn analysis or retention analysis, just the basic knowledge that retaining a customer is much, much cheaper than acquiring a new customer, usually by 2.5 times. So, that kind of knowledge that only comes from working from revenue-facing projects is invariably what they're looking for.
One thing I might add to this, Paro, is that actually due to legacy or some department policy, sometimes the word data science is not provided as an option to HR to recruit around. So they use data strategy, data advising, data consultant, etc. So it's a funny thing, and they had a lot of internal discussion about it. But no, The word science is reserved for environmental science, for example, and that's how it's been for a long, long time. So, but I agree with Preet. Usually it's something more senior. So you talk about, not a senior data scientist, probably a lead data scientist or a director will be talking strategy, discussing solutions, the hardware and the software installations, what kind of vendor can deliver on this, or what kind of a team you need to build to solve that problem. So at least it will take few years of experience doing the work with your own hands before being able to give reasonable judgment on things, and making sure to follow in, trends with some depth, so you can do the same thing as coaching your management, telling them deep learning might not be the best solution for you. Sometimes a pair of scissors is all what you need.
Thank you for those insights.
Anytime.
Yeah, great question. I know we're running over. I think last question, we'll cut it off here. I think a great one, and something me and Preet were actually just talking about, like one-off async, but Shayla asked, she's Southern California as well, any particular meetups, networking events you may recommend to attend, or how is the in-person data science community down in Southern California?
It's very fragmented. I was a big meetups guy when I was in Denver. Not so much over here, just because it's very fragmented. LA, if anybody's lived in LA, if there's a meetup in Irvine and you live in West LA, there's no way in hell you're making it with the traffic conditions. If you live in the Valley I used to go down to the Information Sciences Institute in Marina Del Rey. By the way, that's a great tip. They've so this is the University of Southern California's research division. They're in Marina Del Rey, and almost every Friday they've got seminars on NLP and general AI. It's academic research, but it's brilliant academic research. So that's a good tip. Zillard holds AI LA. There's a really nice R meetup, which is extremely popular. These things, by the way, invariably get incredibly full. We're talking about 200, 300 people show up sometimes. Other than that, actually, LA is ripe for having more meetups. I'll turn it over to Chris. I had asked him if Springboard could set up something, which I think would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something we've heard from mentors and students. We hosted our first Springboard Rise here in San Francisco, I believe September, and Preet was one of our mentors there. We had our mentor community, and it was, I think, rewarding for everybody I at least got to talk with, and it showed us the importance of in-person community. And I know we've mentioned it here before, but in 2019, I hope this gets built out more at Springboard, the SF Bay Area, where you're gonna get more connected and more meetups happening even like starting next month. But as a team, to be transparent, we're thinking about how can this model be replicated in the other areas our students are in. So I know there's a guy in Seattle and a guy in Chicago, and there's people everywhere, and there's groups of students everywhere. So we hope to see that in the coming months. I think in the interim, I would recommend reaching out to your course community. It never hurts to do it. Likely there's another 10 students in Southern California that if they see our post, maybe it means just getting together, or they might have some advice. So for the time being, put yourself out there. But I hope in the coming months, and as all of you turn to alumni, you help build out the in-person community that I think inevitably and invariably has been waiting to come about. So stay tuned, but hopefully not too long is what I would like to say. Well, cool. Well, great session. I think, Preet, we put you on the hot seat with a lot of questions, but your insight was awesome. So we appreciate it.
No worries. I enjoyed it.
Thanks so much, Preet. I made some closing comments. Please take them seriously. Bye.
Yeah, Palm Springs, Fly Mentors, NT's party. I'm there. All right. Well, we'll be back next Thursday. Mohammad, Ram, thank you as always. And then
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.